Hey guys, Matt from Patapsco Falls here, and today we're going to start a new scratch build. We're going to build the Ellicott Brothers Hardware Store, and we're going to start by talking about the design process, inspiration, and materials needed to complete a successful scratch build. Let's start with talking about the tools you need to make your drawings. Of course, the first thing you're going to need is a pencil. I like to use just a regular wooden Ticonderoga pencil, but lots of people like mechanical pencils, drafting pencils. There's a lot of different options. I think these work just fine. Next up is the scale rule. This is a pretty specialized piece of equipment that we use in scale modeling. You really do need this. It's pretty important to have. They're available through a bunch of online resources like Micromark, Amazon. There's a few different options depending on what kind of scale you're working in. I have this little guy here as well that does some of the other scales, larger scales. But generally, model railroading, scale rule, HO scale, S gauge, O gauge, and then N scale on the back. So you need to pick yourself up one of these. Metal scales are important for keeping everything square. I got a few different types here that I like to use. This is a simple machinist square. It's non-adjustable. It's relatively small. It's pretty handy for squaring up walls and making sure things are plumb and parallel. And then I have a couple different sizes of combination square. Combination squares are helpful when it comes to drawing. Hooking the edge of the combination square on the edge of your work surface so that you can make sure that you're drawing square lines to your on your drawings. And there's nothing worse than working on a set of drawings and finding out that everything's a little out of square or not parallel, and then the drawings aren't as useful when it comes time to build a model off of them. Along with the metal squares, a drafting triangle, which is available at a lot of office supply stores, is very useful for drawing straight edges and square corners on your drawings. Again, these are available online and locally. Super handy. You should pick yourself up one of these. They're not very expensive. One of the most important pieces of equipment that you can have is a good eraser, like one of these little Statler white rectangular erasers. You can get these again locally at office supply stores. You'll sometimes find them in the grocery store. Again, not very expensive. You really should pick some of these up. They're better than the eraser at the end of the pencil, although you'll use that too. But these are really clean. Erase your lines. You're going to make mistakes. You need to get a really good eraser. Of all the drawings that I make for a scratch build, probably the most important is the site plan. I use the site plan to properly locate the model on the layout. So there's a couple things I want to capture with this build. Obviously my inspiration is Baltimore, mid-50s. I've always loved hardware stores, so I wanted to build a hardware store. This is going to go right at the front of the layout, so there's going to be lots of details. So I want to have the storefront. I want to have a row house because Baltimore is famous for its row houses. So the little row house that's attached to the hardware store is sort of an addition or an annex. And then I wanted to have the elevation change so that the building looks like it's going downhill. Elevation changes add a lot of interest, so that you know, the building isn't just on a flat surface. And then I want to have multiple textures, multiple sidings, if you will, on the building. So the two main structures being brick, they'll have a stone foundations on the bottom, you know, and then the wood frame hyphen piece, which I can then put clapboard, I can put asphalt shingles. Then I have multiple opportunities for different roofs, again, shingles or metal roofing, tar roofing, you know, there's a lot of different options here. Loading dock made out of concrete. All these things add a lot of interest because you don't end up having the same material everywhere. It's just a lot of stimulus for the person who's observing your model. And then I also want to have the building show a growth through time. So obviously they started with a simple building, acquired the neighboring property, built in between, lots of additions, lots of bump outs and changes in both elevation and changes in facade. The buildings are going to curve around the street. There's lots of in and outs. All these things are adding visual interest to the model. And so that's all what I'm trying to do with the design. And you obviously want to try to figure out as much of this as possible in this phase before you start working on the actual build. And the materials become a little more expensive than a piece of paper and a pencil. The other thing that I always enjoy in a good model is the opportunity to explore. Imagine shrinking yourself down and wandering through the spaces. And so I want to create sort of hidden areas that are difficult to see, maybe you can't see, but you want to kind of bend down and peek around and try to see back inside and do a little exploring. So when you're doing your actual drawing of your buildings, you're going to need to think about the scaling and the massing of these. I tend to use a lot of round numbers. You know, the building is, you know, 30 feet that direction. It's about 25 feet in height. So I use those. Those are based on what I have available, obviously, in my site plan, and then just noodling things out, putting things down on paper, trying them out, seeing how they work. When it comes to heights, generally speaking, each floor is about 10 feet, maybe a little bigger, depending on the detailing. But 10 feet's a pretty nice round number for a floor. Windows are generally 2.5 to 3 feet from the floor location, so that helps locate those. I try to get my windows that I'm going to use in the model and use those to help lay out where the windows are going to go. It helps to get a feel for the look if you have the actual pieces. I've drew this ganged window unit in there. I'm not sure I'm going to do that. I'm not real happy with the way that looks. I probably will end up putting in something a little simpler, either something like this or some smaller windows. But those are the kind of things, you know, that brings up the idea of changes. Don't be afraid to make changes. Nothing that you've done in these drawings has got to be written in stone. You're going to make changes as you go. You can make changes in the drawings. You can make changes as you build. I'm not sure I'm going to include this little wart section, bump out section like this. I think I'm going to put a sign here instead of all these windows. These are all things that you're going to see in your drawings that you can change as you go. But yeah, making sure that you lay everything out, draw things based on the scaling, and then start thinking about how you want to detail it. Even at this early step, I've started pulling up signage that I want to use so that I can have some ideas of where I want to put the signage. It inspires me as far as, you know, I did a little research on tools, 1950s tools, which is a passion of mine, and things specific to Baltimore as far as products. Created my sign sheet just off of Google. Pulled these images off of Google and shrunk them down, made a bunch of signs. So now these will help drive a little bit about the design. You know, if there's a space for a sign here, I'm going to have the space for the sign in the back here. Potentially some signage on the windows, maybe on some of the other walls, some advertising signs inside of the storefront. All these kind of things help drive my design, excite me about the project, and move things down the road. Sometimes I build foam core mock-ups. This is the mock-up that I built for the Light Street Pier. They help with figuring out spacing, figuring out some of the details as far as how it's going to work or how you're going to make them. They're very useful. You can miss a lot of mistakes by making a mock-up first. I don't think I'm going to make a mock-up of this particular building. I think I'm going to jump straight into it. We'll see how that goes. Might be a mistake, you never know. But nothing cheaper than some foam core or some cardboard to make some mock-ups to save you a lot of grief down the road. So the materials that we're going to use for this build are going to include brick sheet and stone sheet, concrete block, corners, all from Monster Model Works. We're going to be using some clapboard from Mount Albert Scale Lumber Company. We are going to use scale lumber from Northeastern Scale Lumber, including some of their dollhouse moldings. We're going to use windows and doors from Tichy Train Group. So we've got a bunch of those. And then we're also going to use some supplies from our local craft store, including Joann's and Michael's and even Home Depot. Just strip wood and little tiny moldings. So let's gather all our materials and we'll get to building. All right, guys, well, we've got our plans and we've got our materials and we're ready to start scratch building. We're gonna get going in earnest in the next video. I hope you're as excited as I am, and if you are and you wouldn't mind subscribing, it'd be much appreciated. And click the like button, and if you have any questions or things you'd like to see in future episodes, please leave some questions and such down in the comments. All right, everybody, thanks for watching.